Iberhood relations. Discuss the indispensability of a strong relation between India and Sri Lanka. 250 words. Reference, The Hindu. Why this question? The question is in the backdrop of Sri Lankan Prime Minister's official visit to India. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the indispensability of a strong relation between India and Sri Lanka despite odds and the strains that the two countries faced in the past. Directive, subscribe this YouTube channel. Discuss, this is an all-encompassing directive. You have to debate on paper by going through the details of the issues concerned by examining each one of them. You have to give reasons for both for and against arguments. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly explain the background of relationship between the two countries. Body. Trace the relationship over a timeline from past to present. Discuss the avenues that the two countries have for each other, where they can manifest a strong bilateral relationship. Explain the challenges involved. Suggest what steps are being taken by the government of India to ensure better and stronger ties between the two countries. Conclusion. Conclude with way forward. Introduction. Historical and cultural relations. Recent developments. Indispensability of a strong relation between India and Sri Lanka. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Diplomatic cooperation. Economic cooperation. Defense and security cooperation. Development assistance. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Cultural and educational cooperation. Agreement back in 1977. Significance of the relations. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Way forward. Do you think India's desire to diversify its defense imports was India-Russia relations in recent past? Examine. 250 words. Reference, The Hindu. Why this question? In the 5th India-Russia Military Industry Conference held during the DefExpo 2020 in Lucknow, 14 MOUs were signed between Indian and Russian companies. Thus the question. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the effect that the diversification of defense imports will have on the relationship that India shares with Russia. Directive. Examine. When asked to examine, we must look into the topic, content words, in detail, inspect it, investigate it and establish the key facts and issues related to the topic in question. While doing so, we should explain why these facts and issues are important and their implications. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly highlight the fact that much of Indian military equipment is sourced from Russia. Body. Discuss that today their bilateral ties officially labeled special and privileged strategic partnership focus heavily on defense cooperation, while the economic partnership remains listless, even as the respective relations of the two with other states have grown rapidly. Discuss other countries with which India is importing defense equipment, explain the effect of that on Russian aspect. Discuss in such a situation and the relationship between the two, how diversification of defense imports will affect the Indo-Russian relations in the present context and the near future. Conclusion. Conclude that while the relationship between the two remains generally strong and without significant obstacles, both countries need to critically examine the substance and future of their ties. For a more coherent policy outlook, subscribe this YouTube channel. Introduction. Body. India-Russia defense trade. Reasons for decline in defense trade. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Recent developments in India-Russia defense trade. Way forward. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements involving India and/or affecting India's interests. Despite the unsolved tension between Israelis and Palestinians, the defining war is a broader struggle among multiple players seeking regional hegemony. Thus, is it right to say that New West Asia today is rife with small state, non-state actors pitted against each other? Analyze. 250 words. Reference, Indian Express. Why this question? More than half a century ago, when analysts talked about war in the Middle East, they referred to a single overarching and permanent tension which existed between Israel and Arab countries like Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Today, in the new Middle East and despite the unsolved tension between Israelis and Palestinians, the defining war is a broader struggle among multiple players seeking regional hegemony. Thus, the question. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the changed scenario in the West Asia and in what way it is today at rife with small state, non-state actors pitted against each other. Directive. Analyze. When asked to analyze, you have to examine methodically the structure or nature of the topic by separating it into component parts and present them as a whole in a summary. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly explain the implied meaning of New West Asia. Body. Explain in detail how there are fractious groups of militias, religious groups, and tribal forces that exercise power in much of the region. These groups have grown vastly in the past 20 years, and many of them have been and continue to be financed and controlled by Iran and Saudi Arabia. As a result, contemporary West Asia has been shifting constantly between state actors, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Iraq, and Israel, and non-state actors, the militia groups and local forces, that actually controlled much of the land. At times, non-state actors like the Hezbollah of Lebanon have been more influential than the national governments. Take hints from the article and present your viewpoints. Conclusion. Conclude that understanding the geopolitics of the new Middle East is the key to the entire situation. Introduction. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Body. Israel-Palestine conflict. 1993, two-state solution. However, the tensions in West Asia goes beyond this conflict. Multiple players and the power struggle amongst state and non-state actors. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Post, Yemen's, Turkey, Israel's. Subscribe this YouTube channel. The Islamic State. Conclusion. Discuss the historical and current engagements of India with Africa. Why is Africa important for India? 250 words. Reference, Hindustan Times. Introduction. The historical engagements of India with Africa. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Nature of the relationship so far. Importance of Africa for India. Geostrategic. Economic. Geopolitical. The relationship changed and there are areas where both India and Africa can work together. Subscribe this YouTube channel. China role. Role of Indian businesses. Way forward. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Conclusion. What is Blue Dot Network? How will it benefit India amidst evolving Indo-Pacific strategies of the U.S.? Discuss. 250 words. Reference, Indian Express. Why this question? Amidst the high-pitched visit of Trump to India, roars of India joining the US-led Blue Dot Network. BDN, is in the news again. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the concept of Blue Dot Network and its possible benefits to India amidst the changing Indo-Pacific strategies of the US. Directive. Discuss, this is an all-encompassing directive, you have to debate on paper by going through the details of the issues concerned by examining each one of them. You have to give reasons for both for and against arguments. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly explain the concept of Blue Dot Network. Body. The BDN was formally announced on November 4, 2019 at the Indo-Pacific Business Forum in Bangkok, Thailand. It will be led by the US along with Japan and Australia. It is a multi-stakeholder, subscribe this YouTube channel, initiative to bring together governments, the private sector and civil society to promote high-quality, trusted standards for global infrastructure development. It is expected to serve as a globally recognized evaluation and certification system for roads, ports and bridges with a focus on the Indo-Pacific region. Discuss the possible benefits it can bring to India, explain challenges involved. Conclusion. Conclude with way forward. Introduction. Body. Benefits of Blue Dot Network for India. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Conclusion. While both India and the UPSC sit together for bilaterals, the Pakistan factor may continue to be an irritant in the larger scheme of the strategic partnership. Discuss what the challenges before India are and suggest solutions. 250 words. Reference, The Hindu. Why this question? Addressing the crowd at Ahmedabad's Motera Stadium, the US President Donald Trump also referred to Washington's relationship with Pakistan, which he described as a very good one. Thus, the question. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the challenges that India faces amidst tricky bilateral relations of India with America and that of America with Pakistan. Also suggest what India's stand should be. Directive. Discuss, this is an all-encompassing directive, you have to debate on paper by going through the details of the issues concerned by examining each one of them. You have to give reasons for both for and against arguments. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Start by commenting on the evolving relations between India and US. Body. Discuss the fact that both the Trump administration and Islamabad have taken sustained efforts in recent times to improve bilateral ties, despite India's earnest attempts to isolate Pakistan over its support for terrorist groups operating from its soil. Highlight the details of their changing relations, such as Pakistan, which hosts the leadership of the Afghan Taliban as well as the Haqqani network, which is a key constituent of the Taliban, had played a critical role in facilitating direct talks between the insurgents and the Americans. After the Pulwama attack and the subsequent dogfight between India and Pakistan, Islamabad has taken efforts to charm the Trump administration. In the most recent example of the UPSC soft policy towards Pakistan, Washington and its allies along with China raised no adverse remark on Pakistan. In the review meeting of the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, discuss what should India's stand be. Conclusion. Conclude that the Trump administration's policy is to stay engaged with Pakistan with offers for limited protection, while seeking to strengthen trade, defense and strategic ties with India. The biggest challenge before the Indian side, while pushing to deepen ties with Washington, is to reconcile with the Pakistan factor or find ways to address it. Introduction. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Body. Challenges before India. The best possible course of action for India is strategic. Nature and scope of our conflict. Diplomatic. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Dialogues at the highest level to track to diplomatize. People-to-people contact. Economic. Technological. Against cross-border firing. Conclusion. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Effective policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests. Indian diaspora. Will Trump's peace plan help resolve Israel-Palestine crisis? Discuss the possibilities and suggest way forward. 250 words. Reference, The Hindu. Why this question? The West Asia peace plan has been unveiled recently by US President Donald Trump. Thus the question. Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the relevance of the plan in addressing the Israel-Palestine crisis and a possible way ahead of it. Directive. Discuss, this is an all-encompassing directive, you have to debate on paper by going through the details of the issues concerned by examining each one of them. You have to give reasons for both for and against arguments. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly explain what the plan is. Body. The peace plan seeks to give the Israelis what they have long wanted, an expansive state with Jerusalem as its undivided capital and tight security control over a future Palestinian state. With his plan, Mr. Trump is actually pushing to revive the stalled two-state talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but on his own terms. The Trump plan seeks to address most of the contentious issues in the conflict, such as the border of Israel, the status of Palestinian refugees, Jewish settlements on the West Bank, Israel's security concerns and the status of the city of Jerusalem. However, the solutions Mr. Trump has proposed to almost all of these issues favor the Israeli positions. Explain the areas in detail. Conclusion. Conclude with your opinion as to whether the plan will work or more needs to be done in this direction. Introduction. Background. Conflicts between Israel-Palestine. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Jerusalem. Palestinian statehood, recognition. Borders. Settlements, refugees. How West Asia peace plan help resolve Israel-Palestine crisis. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Possibilities. Impossible for any Palestinian, Arab, Muslim or Christian child to accept. India's response. Way forward. To retain the status quo. To have a single democratic federal state with equal rights to Jews, Muslims, Christians and others. Three-state solution. International community should proceed to resolve the crisis step by step and hence pursue the option of self-rule to Palestine. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Conclusion. At the moment, India is one of the few countries which have major interest in international seaborne trade. In the backdrop of such a situation, critically examine the role played by India in the International Maritime Organization, IMO. 250 words. Reference, The Hindu. Why this question? The article presents a detailed analysis of case of a maritime presence adrift Key demand of the question. The answer must discuss the role India has to play in International Maritime Organization, IMO, as a key player that is seeking to enhance its interest in international seaborne trade. Directive. Critically examine. When asked to examine, we have to look into the topic, content words, in detail, inspect it, investigate it and establish the key facts and issues related to the topic in question. While doing so we should explain why these facts and issues are important and their implications. When critically is suffixed or prefixed to a directive, one needs to look at the good and bad of the topic and give a fair judgment. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Briefly explain the importance of IMO. Body. Discuss in detail the India's negligible presence and interventions in the International Maritime Organization, which is affecting its interests. Argue that it's high time that India should regain its status as a major maritime power. Highlight the inadequate presence and interventions of India in the organization. Discuss the recent decisions in this direction. Conclusion. Conclude by reasserting the prospects of key role that India needs to take in the organization. Introduction. Body. International Maritime Organization, IMO. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Role played by India in the International Maritime Organization. Conclusion. Subscribe this YouTube channel. The United States Trade Representatives, USTR, has updated its list of developing and least developed countries, removing India from the list of countries that are designated as developing. What does this indicate for India? Discuss and elaborate on the pros and cons, 250 words. Reference, Indian Express. USTR has updated its list of developing and least developed countries. Introduction. USTR list of developing and least developed countries. Negligible import volumes. Criteria. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Impact on India. Conclusion. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Subscribe this YouTube channel. Note, answers are not model answers.